It's very early, but I have something to show you. I think we're still right on time. You know, when I posted about how this land was being sold to a company that develops luxury apartments, a few people commented, "Oh, boo-hoo, she's gonna lose access to her view." It's true, that would make me very sad. This has been our path to the beach for a couple decades now. But it's about so much more than that. So a couple of months ago, I saw a for sale sign on this land. This is a 40-acre plot that's in front of the ocean and also connects to my backyard. It's privately owned, and we've always wondered about La Finca de Gaza because it's remained pretty much untouched since we moved here more than 20 years ago. Check out my brother taking video of it when he came to visit one time after he had already moved away.
Beautiful place.
He wasn't very good at keeping the camera steady, but listen to what he said.
You know what you have till you don't have it anymore.
Now, I hate to admit my older brother was right about anything he told me growing up, but he was right about this. At the time of that video, I was a teenager still living here in Camuy, and I definitely didn't appreciate living here as much as I do now. I just didn't understand the value of this place, and I don't mean in terms of money. I mean in terms of natural resources. However, this land does have a price tag, and when I saw that for sale sign, I called the realtor and I asked how much. He said $1.1 million. I immediately worried that the people who could afford that would be people who would want to develop it in a way that it would be harmful to the ecosystem and to Puerto Ricans who depend on it. So I kept calling the realtor every week asking for updates until one day in March he came to look at the land, and what he told me confirmed my worst fears. A buyer had made an offer and the seller had accepted it. When I looked up the buyer, it was a company that develops luxury apartments. So I didn't expect to react like that, but what you can see in that video is me being overcome by sadness and a feeling of powerlessness. And this is where you wonder, why do you care? It's not your land. And that's true, but in Puerto Rico, no matter who owns land like this, we depend on it for food and water.
Todo el mundo dice, esto está baldío. Baldío están los cerebros que no pueden entender que esto es la alcancía que tienen las generaciones futuras para producir comida que puedan necesitar.
Abel Valenieves is the president of an organization that protects the karst of Puerto Rico. The karst is rock formation that's mostly on the northern part of the island. All of Camuy sits on the karst, so building on this land would be building on the karst. And the reason that's so delicate is because all these trees and plants that you see around me hold water that slowly filters through the soil and eventually makes it to our aquifers. If you cover this up with concrete, the soil would hold less water, and the water that does filter through would be potentially contaminated by human activity, like cars and sewage systems.
When people think in the short-sighted view of, oh, we're going to have jobs which will last while there's construction. When the construction is finished, there's no more jobs. But water, you're going to need it while you're alive and on this planet. So the question is, are we going to put at risk, and for the short term, the lives of people and the long term? That's what we are talking about.
I hope my dogs were not too distracting in that. If you follow me on social media, you know they think they're the main characters, so I apologize in advance because you will be seeing a lot of them in this video. But back to the story. This is where my two worlds collided, because as a reporter, I had already been investigating the issue of land in Puerto Rico, specifically protected land. So I was familiar with something called the Land Use Plan of 2015. That map shows how land all over Puerto Rico has been classified. So I immediately looked up this land, and I found that it had protections against big development projects. But for my story, I had also been talking to environmental lawyers, activists, even former government employees, and they all said the same thing, that those protections were not being respected in some cases. Abel Vale says it's something he's been fighting against for years.
It is sort of a this never-ending story that we have in Puerto Rico that we have to develop, and develop. And we have been told, and I'm 70 years old, and when I was a child, I was told, oh, don't worry, in the future, everything will be a lot better because we're going to have this, we're going to have that. And still, we're after that sort of dream that never ends.
The other reason what happens on this land is a big deal is because aside from being on the karst, it's fertile farmland. When the government developed that land use plan, it set aside more than 630,000 acres of land to feed Puerto Ricans, and this land is part of that. And now it was at risk.
Podemos generar todo el dinero del mundo. El día que tumbemos todos los árboles y destruyamos toda la naturaleza y lo hayamos metido en los bancos, vamos a ir a hacer ensalada de billetes. No.
When Maria and Irma came, it made it very clear that if we don't have food here, we starve.
That's Maria Olga Reyes Cruz, and she's the president of the land trust that's trying to rescue farmland and make it available to sustainable farmers in Puerto Rico. And what she's talking about is something I mentioned in my video about food sovereignty. Puerto Rico imports about 85% of the food we eat. So when food delivery was impossible after Hurricane Maria, supermarket shelves were empty.
When we can't get food from outside, we don't have enough food here. So agricultural land has to be not only protected for that use, but needs to be in the hands of people who are going to farm sustainably for local consumption.
I had already been talking to Maria Olga for the story, so when I found out about this land, I called her.
That was a scandal. Nothing short from agricultural activity can be done in that land.
I also reached out to all of you.
Hi TikTok. This is private land, but it's also protected land.
That video got millions of views, and a lot of you sent me messages and comments asking how you could help, wanting to donate. I didn't know what to do with that money, so I reached out to Maria Olga and I asked if I could direct it to her organization, because that's what they do. They're trying to rescue farmland.
We received hundreds and hundreds of small and medium donations from people all over Puerto Rico, the United States, and abroad.
They got almost $25,000, which is more than they've received since they started a couple of years ago. And thanks to that, they were able to start a fund to buy back land.
It really warmed our hearts to see so many people recognizing an important effort here by providing fair access to low-income landless farmers that take care of the land and take care of each other.
It wasn't enough to buy this land, which by the way is still on the market, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But a lot of people ask me, how can it be sold if it's protected land? Well, it belongs to someone, and that owner can sell it and anyone can buy it, but there are limits to what that new owner can do on this land.
Having title over a land doesn't give you the right to do just anything that you want on that land. Because what I do in my property is going to affect other people, not just me. When it comes to land that is classified as farmland, the responsibility is even higher because you own land that could feed people.
So throughout all of this, the question I've had is, why would a developer of luxury apartments be interested in land that's protected for agriculture? And the short answer is, I don't know, because I've reached out to the company several times for an interview and they haven't responded. But this is what a former government official tells me.
The thing is that the practice here, the common practice has been that anything can be changed if you have the money, if you have the time, if you have the connections.
Pedro Cardona Roy was the vice president of the Puerto Rico Planning Board. That's the agency that decides what will happen with land in Puerto Rico. And he was on the board when 7 reserves were created, including an agricultural reserve that protects this land. Now remember, I knew about the land use plan of 2015, but I didn't know this land had reserve status. And really, there was no way for me or anyone else to know, because when I went to the website of the planning board, that information wasn't there. What I did find was coverage that the administration of ousted Governor Ricardo Rosselló had tried to get rid of the reserves. The case ended up in the Puerto Rico Supreme Court, and the court decided that they couldn't just eliminate the reserves without consulting the public. So according to that court order from 2019, those reserves should have always been in effect, and the information should have been available publicly. But it was 2021, and I couldn't find it anywhere. After going back and forth with the planning board, they finally admitted the information wasn't available, and they made a public announcement that they were going to release it. Even the governor tweeted about it.
I think that the public opinion was so loud, and I think that they saw that this was becoming an issue, and they had to address the issue.
Do you think they would have made the information about the reserves public if people hadn't posted about it online, shared the story, signed petitions?
No, because this is something I had been insisting on since 2019.
So now we have the documents that confirm that those reserves exist. But a big question remains. Were there any illegal developments approved during the time that the information about the reserves wasn't publicly available? And I wish I could answer that question, but what we got were PDFs, which are really hard to match with each one of these cases one by one. There's a much better way to do this, and it is with the interactive map that the planning board has on its website, but they have yet to include the reserves on that interactive map. And I've been asking them when they will do it for a couple of months now, and I have yet to get an answer. They also didn't respond to a request to interview them for this video. But Pedro says that in his experience, transparency is the best way to avoid corruption and illegality.
The agency has a lot of very honest and people that abide by the law, but there are others that do not. And the main thing is, if you have open data, if you have open access to information, you reduce that a lot.
Now I realize I sort of buried the lead, so if you made it this far, thank you. But here's the update on this land. The deal with the luxury apartment developer fell through. And I can't say it had anything to do with our push for transparency because those negotiations are private, and I did ask to speak to the sellers directly and they declined. What I can say is that thanks to all of you paying attention to the story and sharing it, we know more now than we used to. But it's not over. This land is still up for sale, and so is other sensitive land, as we've come to find out, like land around El Yunque, Puerto Rico's rainforest. So here's what I want to do. I want to do a comprehensive story of land all over Puerto Rico. I want to look into what land is protected, what land is not, what's allowed, what's prohibited. And this is kind of ambitious, but I want to create a database where anyone can go and search their town and see if there are any cases of potentially illegal developments near them. So every time I post about this issue, a lot of you ask, how can we help? And I'm going to take you up on that. So I'm going to ask for 3 different things: donations, information, or skills. So when I do these stories, they come out of my pocket. I pay for the equipment, travel costs, etc. But this is a big story that's a little bit outside my budget, so I'm going to do a crowdfunding campaign, and whomever gives a donation, big or small, your name will be in the credits because you would have made this story possible. Number 2, information. I get messages all the time with people showing me a development that they think might be illegal, so I'm going to create a link where you could put information of whatever case you think is questionable. Give me as much information as possible so I can include it in my research. And number 3, your skills. If you're a good researcher, you're good with databases, you're a good video editor or motion graphic designer, I'm going to have a link where you could put that in there and let me know if you want to be part of this story. And speaking of help to create my videos, I didn't do this one alone, so I want to give a big thanks to Burkey, who drove all around with me to get those interviews done and helped me with some of the editing. And also thank you to Isleños. They're a group of high school graduates who helped me with the drone shots for this video. Not the low quality ones, those are mine, but those really beautiful ones, they shot those, so thank you so much. They have a YouTube channel where they're going to every town in Puerto Rico and doing a video about it, so you should definitely check them out. And thank all of you for all your support as always. I'm really excited about this story coming up, so I'll see you soon.